May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Lord, and glorify your name. Amen.
Amen.
So where do you start? With Indian heritage, where do you start? We've been around for a long time, Indians have. Probably a lot longer than a lot of other people, at least with the culture that survived for thousands of years before the Western Europeans got here and began to express their opinion about what kind of people Indians were. We were savages. Savages. Yeah. One of the things we know in Indian country is that everybody raises the kids. Everybody raises the kids. Even me, when I go on a reservation, those kids know me, and if I ask them to do something, they do, and it doesn't matter that I'm not from the reservation. They've been taught all their lives to respect elders. Now, in the way of Indian thinking, what makes an elder? Anybody know what makes an elder?
Being older.
Being older helps.
Wisdom,
Knowledge.
understanding.
Understanding. Wisdom. But you know what? Just because you're old doesn't mean you're an elder. It just means you're old. We learn to respect our elders, but we listen for the truth. And we listen quietly, and we go our own way, and we make our judgments about the things that we want to do as Native people. And we're always involved in ceremonies like the sweat lodge. Sweat lodge is what we call a pan-Indian custom. Just about every tribe has something like the sweat lodge or something comparable to it. Every year, there's going to be a family celebrating the death of a loved one. Because the way we celebrate that loved one is we keep them close to us for a year, and we let them go. We don't keep their spirits here by being preoccupied and obsessed with them. They have something else to do. They do, and Indian people believe that. Indian people believe that death and dying is just a change. It's a different life. Now, who knows what it's going to be like? I don't know. I hope my dogs are there. It's a kind of thing that, we all want to understand better. Now, there's bound to be some folks in here who think they'd like to be an Indian. When you go to a powwow, I see a lot of people there who think they'd like to be an Indian. And I'm telling you something, being an Indian ain't easy. The poorest people in this country are Indians. Do you know that? Highest accidental death rate among Indians is auto accidents. Kids commit suicide. They have the highest adolescent suicide rate of any minority group in the country. And I'll tell you, I've seen so many kids die. It's just a hard thing to take when you know that it doesn't have to happen. They don't sell beer on the reservations, but I guarantee you there's a place to get beer right off the reservation. It's not good for Indian folks. Indian people shouldn't drink. And they could come to me and explain how it's okay for them to drink. Indian people shouldn't drink. I'm just going to say it over and over and over again to the universe. Indian people shouldn't drink. And I'll tell you, find an Indian person who's a really nice person and get a couple of beers in them, they're not nice anymore. They get crazy. My dad was like that. So many problems. But let's look at one. In 2023, the Episcopal Church had some meeting. The Episcopal Church was involved in running at least 34 of the schools and also had an outsized role that it played in terms of creating these boarding schools really all over the country. So last year, they allocated $2 million, the church allocated $2 million in developing a truth-seeking process. That'll take years. We're going to study it to death. Know what I mean, Rick?
No, yeah.
We're going to study it to death, and then we're going to tell you what we're going to do. The church now, speak. We're going to tell you what really happened. The church, the Episcopal Church, is going to figure out what really happened. I'll tell you what really happened. They got money from the federal government for setting up boarding schools all across this country, and then the federal government walked away from it and didn't give a doggone about what happened to those kids in those boarding schools. And now we're finding the cemeteries. The places where kids were buried without any sign or indication even of who they were. Are Indian people doing an apology? Well, you know what? I sure as heck rather the church make an apology of some kind instead of just study something to death. You know how long this has been going on? Studying things to death? Now, having said that, I understand. But what the church doesn't understand, I understand that it takes time. I understand that people have to educate themselves. But some people don't have time. Indian people in this country have been suffering under the thumb of Western Europeans for 400 years. It's time for an apology, and I'm really tired of waiting. I am. How long should the people have to wait for justice to be served? And does this sound familiar to any of you out there?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's this way for many cultures. In this country, we were talking earlier about how fortunate we are to have so many cultures in this country. And yet, many people reject those cultures. They think their culture is better than that culture. Is Indian culture better than Taiwanese culture? Well, it depends on who you talk to, right? But the truth is that we shouldn't be making judgments about these things. People died. Lazarus died. There are a lot of Christian Indians in Indian country, and they still do their ceremonies as they've always done them because that's what they were taught. At the Sundance, we dance for everybody in the world, every country, every person. We dance so that the world will be here in the future. That's what we do. I could go over all the terrible things that were done to Indian people. Trail of Tears, Navajo Trail of Tears, Wounded Knee, Sand Creek, you know, so many things that happened. And finally, at least our president apologized. I like old Joe. Yeah, he's getting a little like me. But he did something that was necessary to do for this group of people in this country. Indian people, Native Americans, Indigenous. And I'm not going to quit harping on this until I see an apology. And that's going to be my feeling. There's so much that's wonderful about Indian culture. How we do things, how we love our children, how we treat each other. We make mistakes just like any other culture. And we're going to be talking more about this next Sunday. I'm going to do we'll do a healing ceremony at the rail, and we'll do that after the communion, and I will do a blessing for you, and I will use the accoutrements or tools that I'm used to using as a Native American person to do that healing. So, if you want to do that, probably come on down on Sunday. It'll be interesting anyway. It really will. I'm so glad you're all here. So glad Jasmine's getting baptized. What a good day. How could it get any better? Well, if the election was over and Harris has won, that would make it better. I think if that's your persuasion, you know, people are going to vote for the winning. But anyway, thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening about my people. It's really, really important to me. Thank you very much.
Amen.